Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's now time for our next presentation from the Bionic team.
Great, and thank you. Because there's more of you out there than those in the room, I'm going to recap who we are. So the Bionic team gathered from all across the country in response to the RBD RFP. And we're a combination of firms and organizations that were dedicated to finding a way to pilot solutions today and to figure out how resilient by design can be part of the thinking for really the next generation. So we stepped into this collaboration as planners, architects, landscape, I mean, you're all looking at the list up there, right? Landscape architects, economists, a developer, an arts consultant, artists. And we realize, though, that this is not just a collaboration of our team, but really it's a collaboration with all of you. And what we're hoping for is a collaboration with a community that we'll be able to talk to and learn from in the future. Our collective has this variety of experience, and really today we're talking to you as a tripod, a three-legged stool. Marcel Wilson from Bionic, our local landscape architect anchor, Karen McCloskey, our academic Penn anchor, and myself, Claire Wise of WXY. Okay, and that means this. So we want to emphasize as we zoom in that we know this challenge requires holistic thinking. It's not just about what we find and think right here on this spot or any spot in the Bay Area. Everyone is interconnected. It's a completely interconnected problem, which will rely on better and better science and better communication as we go into the future. But there are really three overlapping issues. There's climate change as an ongoing disaster. There is the risk of seismic events, fires, and other events. And there's the crisis of Bay life today, which affordability, stresses on its transit systems. So really, that and the deterioration of our environment bring us to what's really important, which is the conversation. So we're interested in accelerating this conversation. And the policy and research we did really undergirds what we're talking about. Karen will talk to that immediately next. But for us, what's most critical is to start this conversation. And we hope this presentation and the video and today is a conversation starter.
I'm going to quickly take you through our site selection process, which began at the regional scale by prioritizing two factors, physical risk and communities at risk, which are populations who have multiple vulnerabilities. And the darkest areas you see here are areas with residents who have 7 or more of the factors listed here. For physical vulnerability, we prioritize liquefaction potential from earthquake, storm surge, and inland flooding, and also sea level rise using a 9-inch baseline because that's considered most probable by 2040. So we can say with some confidence that this is going to be the norm in just 2 decades. And that's because of the topography of the bay. It's very shallow, and so the initial 6 to 12 inches of sea level rise will actually cause very extensive and widespread flooding. And then that area gets shallower and shallower, as you can see. Which is to say that this is not an issue for the future. It's happening now. So we combined our physical vulnerability with our community vulnerability, and that gives us this map. Our composite minus existing wetlands. So that's what you see here. There are communities of need spread throughout the bay, as well as low-lying areas inland. And so from this, we chose the very darkest colors, so communities who have the most need, the most risk factors, and those who would experience direct impact from just 6 inches of sea level rise. So that's what, That's what this is. This is those communities in need shown with respect to their watersheds, because obviously we need to be planning by watershed, not by jurisdiction. And we limit it to those watersheds that have open channels or creeks, because those are going to experience inland flooding, but they also provide great opportunity for habitat, recreation, and also Bay Area access. So that regional scale analysis got us so far, and then we asked a series of questions that would help us hone in on other areas. And through that conversation and digging a bit deeper, we settled on San Pablo Bay and San Rafael. San Rafael has urgent need, but not a resilience plan, although they just completed a very detailed vulnerability assessment. Especially the Canal District, which has 80% Latino population. It experienced, in the last 25 years, about 50% population increase, but no increase in housing. So there's a lot of overcrowding. And really importantly, it's only 75% of the residents of that district are renters, which means they likely are not aware of the risks involved with where they're living, because they're not required to tell them that by law. So this would be a one-year storm in just 2 decades, which could cause anywhere from 1 foot to 5.5 feet of overland flood. Much of the housing is multi-unit, and its foundations are not built to withstand liquefaction, and so that puts a lot of people at risk. As you know, these are former mud flats with really soft soils, so you have vulnerability for people, for infrastructure, and for buildings. And these are people who are not, don't have the resources to recover easily from such things. Sorry, I should. Also concerning is that the evacuation routes, 580 and 101, are also sitting over these soils. And so that puts them prone to failure during an earthquake, similar conditions that we've seen in previous Bay Area quakes.
So we see data, we see urgency, and in parallel to all of this, there's people and making this real. And so there's a parallel track of this, of just getting out and talking to people and finding out, are you aware that that this is coming? And in our research, no. And on many cases, many levels, across ethnicities, no. And that's a huge problem, and something that we grapple with. And so it really characterizes the issue for us. It's a grand challenge. A lot of work's been done, and that adaptation for something this big will take time. And so we're confronted with a very simple question: how can we help, and where do you start? And so our answer was. We've thought about this in several ways. One way to think about it is just now. Start small and start now, and start at this lowest. Yeah, small, now, low. Small, now, low. Thank you. It's good to have a good team behind you. And then there are things to be done sooner. And that's still urgent. And then there are much larger, ambitious endeavors, and those will probably come later. Another way to say it is easy, harder, hardest. And so to start, how do you solve sea level rise? Stickers. So this is the first thing you do. And the way this works, thank you. That's great. You got one of these. It shows a flood line. It's got a little ruler here, and you go and you find some object somewhere. Measure, and you tag it on there. Okay. So the idea with this is, this is an everywhere issue, right? That nobody knows. It's not visible, and so we think this is an idea transferable for everyone, wherever you go. You're going to have this issue too. And the idea would be to proliferate, right? To make this every day on every object, and to make it real and make it persist, and raise awareness, and keep this in conversation, because larger scale efforts in transformation need that support. So proliferate. The next thing we think makes sense for San Rafael is they're so fragile in some places that community keep it holding together. Do a couple of things like protect their community center or their health center or their food resources. And these are stopgap measures like flood walls, but the larger importance is keeping people together. Why? Because the social resilience. Then there's this idea of then preparing. If you're gonna flood, it's helpful to have a boat. So this is an idea about getting boat lockers, stationing them within the community, having this visibility and communication, and then one day, those resources are there in an emergency. To use boats, you need to know about water. So right here at Pickleweed Park, there's a great place to do a boating center. Simple, easy, fast idea. Teach people about water and boats so when they need to use them, they know how. Then scaling up from that, there's an existing living shoreline pilot. Many of our team members have participated. It's in San Rafael. The next step for this is to just experiment more, a lot more. And so a small step would be develop a kind of section from the mud line to the top of levee, this time include people, and make it something that builds awareness and knowledge, and then scale that up to the whole shoreline and connect it to the neighborhoods and to the way people would use it every day. Then the next kind of step up is housing stock. The housing stock Karen described, there's a lot of it. And the canal really calls for its own typology of new housing stock. So as ownership, car dealerships fade because mobility is changing and big box fails because it does reliably every Christmas, infill and develop this new breed of housing where it's floodable on the first floor and it's meant to adapt over time to live around water. And then the next scale up from that is the edge. The edge in San Rafael is a sharp line, and it really needs to be redefined, and there are opportunities to do this. The idea would be create more exchange, layer it so that it has more resilience and its ecologies are adapting over time, and then make a way to evolve upland. And so this is going from a strict line to a zone. Then the next step up from that is the canal itself. The canal is a beautiful, charming place, and nobody knows about it. It has a lot to do, it's a divide in its own right. A waterfront at the canal to solve the issues of low bridges and failing seawalls and several resources that could be connected together would really solve some short-term issues about connectivity and some larger, more profound issues about social resilience and connection to one another. And if you did that over time, buildings would turn and face the canal and become part of life there as opposed to trying to separate themselves from it. Then there's upstream of the creek. The creek has a sedimentation issue in San Rafael. It fills up with sediment. Last time they dredged it, $2 million. And the Corps of Engineers said that's probably the last time that's going to happen. It needs more dynamic hydraulics to be more self-regulating. A big reason, is because it has two right angles before it hits the channel. So putting a curve back in the creek, making that a wider space, puts the potential for a waterfront in downtown San Rafael closer to transit. And if you talk about this creek, the Crooked Creek, you have to talk about the freeway that spans it. There are kind of two San Rafaels. There's one on one side of the freeway, and there's one on the other. And the freeway itself is in a huge seismic risk. And we know that freeways in soft soils collapse in earthquakes. So if you thinking really big about this, that freeway underground opens up an enormous amount of space. It allows you to adapt to the elevational challenges. It allows you to kind of reposition housing and the industrial jobs that move through there. And it allows you to reposition the transit. So this would be creating connections. You make a boulevard out of this big tract that cuts through the city now. And in doing this, you create a much greater possibility for the smart train, which right now is built below flood elevation. So This would allow you to build the SMART train at a higher elevation, connect it to development opportunities, which can fund things, and get to the Larkspur terminal. If you got SMART to the Larkspur terminal, then the much bigger idea you need to be talking about is the bridge itself. This is an island when it comes to getting, people getting to Marin County. This erector set is the oldest bridge in the three-bridge tripart that makes the bay really work. And this needs to be conceived of as not a monofunctional piece of infrastructure, but multifunctional. More modes, includes people, includes trains, and is built for the future. And you have to think about it that way, because this observation that there's kind of 4 strategic points in the Bay Area that really make everything work, and so much flows through these points, and San Rafael is one of them. So, stickers to the region, and start small, make no small plans. Thank you.